Hi, everybody. Glad to see you. Hi, Vivek.
Hello. So good to see you, Jack. Good to see everyone there.
Yeah. So I'm glad this is
Hi,
one of the first
Wildfire, please
sessions
come
we
back
get
to
to
the
start
stage.
with the doctor. I can hear that old rock and roll song, Doctor, Doctor. You know, we we need it. And I really like this guy, Vivek. I've gotten to know you, and there are, of course, all these accomplishments and things like that. But underneath it, um, you have been a real public servant, and it's like service the way the Bhagavad Gita talks about it as a path to the divine or the sacred. You're a public servant with heart for 8 years, um, and here we are in a time of tremendous cultural anxiety and disruption, and you ended your 8 years with this physician's prescription for America, the prescription for our ills that highlighted what we just heard, including the fact that you said half the people who go into the clinics and doctors' offices and medical hospitals are really suffering from not so much physical ailment, but from the sufferings of the mind and the heart. And that's true in our culture. Um, and so you've been a truth teller. Um, in a gracious way, Doctor, we need some good medicine. Tell us what's your prescription?
Well, Jack, first of all, it's incredibly kind of you. And it has been such an honor for me to not only get to know you as a friend, but long before that, to have considered you such an important teacher for me. And for all those who are listening, Jack and I were together recently, and I told him that I actually first encountered his work at a retreat almost 25 years ago when I was in medical school. And I just have been following, Jack, your work ever since then. So thank you for everything you've done for me and for millions of people out there. For me, Jack, this prescription that I issued in January as my last publication as Surgeon General, this is really rooted in what I was encountering in people I met all across America, which was this sense of unhappiness that was sometimes very apparent, sometimes it was hidden, but it was often there. And I found that many of the reasons and explanations for that unhappiness that I was reading about in the papers, whether it's economic uncertainty, concern about security, or other such issues, those are really important. But it seemed like there was something else that was also going on underneath the surface. And that's what this prescription was all about. It was a reflection on a multi year journey for me to understand what was, in fact, driving that unhappiness. And what I came to conclude was that there were three critical elements that we need for deep fulfillment in our lives that have been eroding over time. And those are relationships with each other, a sense of purpose, and a sense of service and engagement in service. And relationships, service, and purpose are vitally important for our mental health, but it turns out also for our physical health. That when we are engaged in all three, and in each of them individually, it actually has positive effects on cardiovascular health, on our overall mental and executive function, as well as on our sense of well being. But what we're seeing is that over time, these have in fact diminished. So now we have about half of young people and about a third of adults who are saying they're struggling with loneliness, for example. We have over 50% of young people say that they have little or no sense of meaning or purpose in their lives, which is really stunning. And you also look at it and you see that less than half of people in America are engaged in both formal and informal acts of service in their life. We are just less involved with helping each other. And this, I think of these three elements as the triad of fulfillment. And they're really vital. They're the heart of what our lives and society should be built around. But that triad, Jack, has been replaced by a different triad, one that I heard about time and time again from young people whenever I would ask them, how do you define success? And what they would always tell me is that it was fame, money, and power, that those are the three elements that constituted success. And if they could get all three of them, then hey, people would write books about them and make documentaries about them. They would have really made it. Yet what we have seen is that that triad of success, which increasingly is driving society and amplified on social media and in the traditional media, that there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself, but it does not necessarily lead to the kind of fulfillment that we all as human beings desperately seek. And I think that the erosion of the triad of fulfillment has led to this deeper unhappiness and is also manifesting as conflict, as political polarization. And this is why I think to address the challenges that we're seeing today in the world, we're not going to solve that with one single policy or program. We have to get to the deeper root causes and understand that rebuilding that foundation of relationships, purpose, and service is now one of our most important tasks.
Well, when I listen to you, you have to forgive me, but when you didn't put down fame, money, and power, but your emphasis sounds almost un-American for the modern world. Um, the real question, though, is how do we do this? Because you're opening our eyes and really having us reflect on the importance of our connection to one another in relationship and having some sense of purpose and serving. How do people do this?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I want to talk about that. And let me just say one thing about the earlier piece about this being American versus not. What we're seeing here is actually a very interesting phenomenon that's sweeping across modern societies, including America, much of Europe. I see this increasingly in India and in other countries too, which is this sense that, again, money, fame, and power are the definitions of success, that they're the epicenter of what we need to build our lives around. And that is being widely popularized on social media. I'll just give you a couple of examples of this. I was visiting India, for example, about a year ago when I was in office. And I sat down with a group of students. And if you had blindfolded me and changed our accents, I would have thought I was in Lincoln, Nebraska, or in Los Angeles, California, talking to students because they said the same things. The young men were saying that they feel inadequate because they look at what's being posted on social media. They see men with 7% body fat, with washboard abs, traveling in private jets, and surrounded by women, and they say, "Hey, I don't look like that. I don't have that kind of lifestyle yet. I'm not sure how I'm going to get there. I feel like a failure." I heard young women saying the same when it came to body image, but also talking about uh, this sort of level or definition of success that felt almost unattainable in a sense, and that made them feel like failures in their day-to-day lives. But this is, again, what they were seeing online. So I think I look at this as a phenomenon more or less sort of an America-specific phenomenon, more a feature of the modern world that we have to really address. And if you look, in fact, at our past in America, I'm not saying that we've necessarily gotten it right entirely, like in the past, but there were times in our past where we were more connected. For example, go back 50 years ago, and there was a greater participation in America in civic organizations, in service organizations, in faith organizations, in recreational leagues. There was also a greater sense that people knew their neighbors. People had their neighbors over more often for meals, or friends over more often for meals. And we've seen a lot of those patterns shift over time. So this is all not to say that technology is bad in and of itself. But the challenge is when we deploy technology without either understanding the risks associated with it or without being able to mitigate those risks. And for all of its conveniences that technology has brought, I think we have not mitigated some of the isolating effects of technology, some of the damaging effects on dialogue, on the way we talk to each other or don't talk to each other, that have emerged in a world where social media has become the place to exchange ideas as opposed to in person. Finally, just to come to what do we do about this? Here's actually where I find some hope, Jack, because what I have found and been most encouraged by is that what we're talking about here about rebuilding a life around purpose, relationships, and service, this isn't fundamentally like trying to transform people into something that's foreign to them. In fact, I think most people deep down inside want to be a part of a community. They want to feel a sense of purpose in the morning. They want to be enmeshed in a network where people help each other and where that's just the norm. And for all of the publications I issued as Surgeon General, and there were many that we did on issues like loneliness and the impact of social media on youth and parents' mental health, there is no publication that I found I got more direct individual emails from strangers about than on this parting prescription. And it was very personal feedback for people who said, I feel like something's been missing in my life, and I feel like this is what it is. Or I've been desperate to teach my children how to live a fulfilling life, and these are the elements I want them to grow up anchoring in. And this just feels right. How do we do this? So, very simply put, I think we have to approach this on an individual, an organizational, and a societal level. I think at an individual level, we can think about how we build social connection into our day-to-day lives. So simply as spending 15 minutes a day reaching out to someone that we care about, for example, looking for opportunities to serve or help other people. If you can just help one person each day, it can mean something very small. It could be reaching out to a friend who's struggling. It could be helping somebody who's lost on the street. But these small acts of service all add up. At an organizational level, I think we can give thought now to how we design schools and workplaces to actually encourage connection and community, to actually engage students and workers in the workplace in service collectively, which we know has a profound impact on how people feel and then in turn how they operate in the workplace and in school. And then finally, at a societal level, I think this is where culture really comes in. And I find myself, Jack, asking myself, what is the story that we are telling ourselves, our children, the public about what matters, about what constitutes a fulfilling life, about who to look up to? And I want to see ideally more books and more movies and more television shows and more newspaper articles written about people who are building their lives around those three core elements, because that's what I want my children to see in terms of role models. And that's ultimately, I think, what's going to drive the mental and physical and spiritual health and well-being that we know every human being deeply needs.
So part of what you're describing is also the phenomenon of late stage capitalism, um, where there's so much emphasis on that other triad of um, it's both exploitation and accumulation, fame, money, and power, and all of that shown. Um, I'll make it more personal here because I love the prescription of reaching out every day to someone else and finding a way to serve, and then building it into our education systems. Um, you recently retired from these 8 years of service, and you and I were talking, and I suggested, with all that you carry, maybe it would be good for you to go on retreat. Um, and then you were concerned, well, yeah, but my dear wife, she's taking care of the kids and the family, and how could I go away again after I've been so busy for all these years? I said, well, tell Alice, that she gets a week in a spa, so you do a little bit of trade-off. But anyway, um, you had, in a sense, that fame and visibility and power, uh, and even at your level, there is a question of how do you embody it? How do you show your children? And you went on a bit of a retreat. So would you talk about that, how it actually works in your own life?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking, Jack. And I should say thank you so much for the encouragement to take some time and to go on a retreat. It was, again, it whetted my appetite for doing a longer retreat. And even the short time I had was so valuable and was really worth it. But a couple of things that I'm trying to do in my own life, and I'll just say very bluntly and honestly, like I'm a work in progress too. A lot of the things I wrote about are things I have struggled with over the years, and that's one of the reasons why this work is very personal to me. Struggling with the sense of loneliness has been something I've dealt with since I was a child. But also when it came to issues around purpose, for example, I was one of millions of children who was brought up in a society where it was, in fact, wealth, power, and fame that were held up as success. And in the world of medicine that I grew up in, it was things like, are you publishing in the most elite academic journals? How much research funding are you pulling in? Are you being promoted to professorship, at the academic institution you're at? Like these kind of things, which again, there's nothing wrong with any of them. They're fine in and of themselves. But when we come to tie our self-worth to them, when we look to them for our deepest source of fulfillment, that's when we fall short. And I found myself in that bucket as well. So when it comes to my children, I find myself thinking about this all the time with my wife Alice. How do we teach them to really build a life where they are anchored on that triad of fulfillment. And I know that there are many things that we're trying, but one of the things that's really important is for us to lead by example. As somebody once told me when before we had our first child, sometimes your kids will listen to what you say, sometimes if you're lucky, but more often they'll listen to what you do. They'll take from your example. And so in this phase, that's exactly what I'm trying to think about, even more so. Like, how do I build this next phase of my life around family and friends? How do I engage in a sense of service? How do I make sure my purpose key stays anchored on ultimately doing what I know makes my heart sing, which is to try to contribute to ways to build community, to help people return to a sense of meaning in their own lives. So it's an ongoing effort, in my own life. But one thing I know is that if the more we're able to talk openly about these journeys that we're on, the more we're able to give visibility to the importance of these core values around relationships, purpose, and service, the easier it is for our kids to see these not as things that are off to the side, but as pathways that are really central to how they should construct and build their own lives. One last thing I should say on this, though, Jack, is that these three elements that I mentioned, relationships, purpose, and service, I find that they have to be anchored in a core virtue as well. And that virtue is love. And love has multiple manifestations, we know, as generosity, as compassion, as kindness, as patience, as forgiveness. But one of the things I have worried about is, in addition to the erosion of relationships, purpose, and service, it's that core virtue of love is something that we don't talk about enough, that we don't explicitly and intentionally build in to how we raise our kids and how we shape the influences that they see. And so that's something that we're trying to do for our kids. We want them to see strength, not only as the strength that you build perhaps at the gym or in your muscles, but we want them to see strength in character, and a character that's rooted in love, strength in kindness, strength in compassion. I worry sometimes that the world tells people as they grow up that, if you're generous, if you're kind, then you're a sucker, that you're weak, that people are going to take advantage of you, that you've got to be the loudest voice in the room, you've got to be the most aggressive. To me, that's actually not real strength. That's bluster. But we need to make sure our kids are seeing real examples of true strength. And that comes ultimately from our ability to give and to receive love in its different forms.
Well, Vivek, you said just now that part of what helps is to talk openly. And I found, a few moments ago when you talked about you struggle with these two, that immediately there arose in me this sense of compassion, not like, oh, poor Vivek, but more kind of beautiful. We're in this together. Here you are having this really important kind of success and serving in this beautiful way. And yet it's so humane to be able to speak it out loud and say, here we are. We're all wrestling with this in some way. And that truth telling is part of what connects us. And maybe that's also, as you say, it's an expression of love that we're able to speak, because there's a kind of humanity and vulnerability in it. So what about, and I think about it again just because of the current polarization and difficulties, there are also isolation and a kind of increasing isolation for those who are marginalized in the society, which is a large part, probably close to 50% or more, who aren't white or who are LGBT or who are immigrants. And the movement right now, in some ways, is to increase that marginalization. What can we do? Because if we see that we really are all in it together, those of us who care or listening about this, what do you recommend?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked, Jack, because I think one of the hardest things in today's society is to actually see people suffering. We've become really, really good at masking what's actually going on in our lives, at putting on a brave face and making it appear to the outside world that all is good, and that we're strong and fine. But the truth is, like, many of us are struggling inside, and sometimes that may come from discrimination, based on race, based on your, on your sexual orientation. Sometimes they can come from trauma that you've gone through that you're still contending with. So, we all have our own challenges and our own inner demons that we're wrestling with. I think when we recognize that, I've found like in my own life, like if I just recognize that the people in front of me, regardless of what they look like, may be dealing with some deeper pain, that shifts a bit of how I interact with them. I find myself doing this a lot, increasingly with people who I may have had a disagreement with or conflict about it. They do something and it annoys me. Then I try to, in those moments, just stop, take a deep breath, and just recognize, okay, uh, this person may be struggling with something like in their own life. Maybe they're also in pain and I just don't know why. And it's coming out in a way that's perhaps harming other people around them, including myself. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad person. And I don't always do that successfully, but I try to do that as often as I can because it reminds me that the flip is also true. There are times where I probably inadvertently do things that may negatively affect somebody else because I'm coming from a place of my own pain and my own trauma. So I think number one, recognizing that we're all at some level suffering, I think is vital. I think giving people the benefit of the doubt before we jump on them or judge them is also really vital. And that could mean not just in person, but I think we have become somehow so comfortable with chiming in on social media and online to condemn or berate people who we don't even know and can't even see based on one single thing that we heard or said that they may have done. And that I think that we have to step back and pause and just say, let's let's pause again and give a moment before we actually judge somebody. Let's ask ourselves if there may be perhaps a reason why maybe they may be acting the way that they are. And finally, one thing I think it's really I find personally helpful is for us just to take a moment to reach out to others and to check on them and just to see how they're doing. And that could be people we know, friends or family members. It could be people at work that we encounter as well. Like let's just say like you've got somebody in your workplace who's quiet. Let's say doesn't speak up very often, or somebody who is quite vocal but happens to be just more subdued on a given day, and they're not speaking up much in a meeting. Just being able to just after that meeting or at the end of the day, just swing by and just say, hey, just want to check on you and see how you're doing. To you, that might be 60 seconds out of your day. To that person, it's the powerful moment of feeling like they're seen and like they matter. So I would not underestimate the power, the extraordinary power of us seeing other people, checking on them, listening to them. I think in our society, like we're often led to feel like we only add value if we can fix somebody else's problems. But by acknowledging that they matter, by seeing them, which we can do just simply by listening to another human being, we can have a powerful effect on lifting them up at a time when there's so much that is making the people feel like they're invisible and like they don't matter.
I listen to you. I'm quite touched actually, because when you describe how you look at people, especially if there might be somebody that does something that's harming others or annoying or whatever, you're in a way you're describing a parallel to metta, to loving kindness meditation
Yes.
practice, which is a practice that I do. Somebody cuts me off in traffic and I can feel a little annoyance, and then I don't know what happened. Maybe their kid is sick, maybe they just got a bad diagnosis, maybe who knows what, and um, my heart softens just as you
Yeah.
describe. um, so the question I want to ask, because we don't have much more time today, is um, what helps you relax and sleep,
Hmm.
and what keeps you up?
It's a really good question. I'll maybe answer them in reverse. What keeps me up most often is worrying about the future, worrying about my family, and worrying sometimes that I'm not enough, that I'm not doing enough, that I'm not contributing enough. And these
Wait,
again
wait,
aren't
wait. I
always.
just have to pause for a second. I want all of us listening to go, okay, here's this amazingly accomplished person with that same, we all have it. Okay, keep going. I'm just
We do. I mean, a lot of our worries are not always rational, but like and I say this because like I think when I was younger, my feeling was okay, if I'm not feeling like I'm enough, I just need to accomplish more, then I'll feel like I'm enough. That's great. And you can't fill deep internal holes with external, sort of validation or accomplishment. And so those are things that keep me up. I'd say what helps me sleep at night is literally like hugging my children, which I do, right before they go to sleep. And there's something just like very powerful and like deep spiritual energy I feel like I get from them just by holding them. Um, the other thing that helps me sleep is meditation. So sometimes I'll do a short meditation at night. I usually do my meditations in the morning, but sometimes if I'm having trouble at night, I'll do a simple meditation, either a guided meditation or a breath meditation, and that will help me sleep. Um, and then the last is just sometimes music can help me sleep as well. I have a set of bhajans that I listen to and other sort of spiritual songs, and those help calm me and relax me. So those are the things that I use. I have actually a little, what I call my soul box, a collection of videos, songs, poems, and speeches that I hold on to and that I dip into whenever I'm having a moment of worry or I'm feeling exhausted or I'm feeling cynical. And those usually help to calm me, to inspire me, to remind me what really matters. And I've just been building that soul box over the last 20 years or so. And I usually need at least to dip into it at least once a day.
Well, it's beautiful because it's somehow a thread that connects you very deeply with purpose and service and relationship in the most intimate way for yourself. Are you, last question, a lot of us are, well, there's this cultural anxiety and worry. In the long term, do you have optimism? Because temporarily in the short term, we can feel like things are pretty chaotic. And yeah, what's your long term sense of us as human beings, Doctor?
I'm
Is there,
optimistic.
is there a good
Yeah,
prognosis?
I think there is. And I feel optimistic. I feel hopeful. That doesn't mean it's guaranteed that the future is going to be phenomenal, but I do think it depends a lot on what we do today. But what gives me hope is the fact that, number one, I think that our true nature actually is to be loving, to be kind, to be compassionate. I think we hunger for similar things, which is to be a part of something bigger than ourselves, to be connected to one another. And I think that hunger is emerging more and more strongly among people today. I think because we are starting to talk more openly about it, I'm already seeing more conversations in the United States and increasingly in other countries as well around this fundamental question of how do we live lives of purpose and meaning and connection. And then we're already starting to see more experiments around the world where people are starting to do this, whether it's in their workplace, in their school, in their family, in their neighborhood. And I've been blessed, to have the chance to travel to many parts of the country and the world and see examples of this. So what we are now charged to do and called to do is to build a broader movement around community and connection, one that will ultimately shift culture and help us recenter around this triad of fulfillment. It starts with talking more openly about what we value here and what we want to be at the center of our lives. And it follows with actually building that out in our individual lives, in our institutions. It evolves ultimately to choosing leaders and role models, whether it's in our organizations or in public office, who then embody those core values. But I do believe that we can get there. I think the more of us who speak up, who choose a different path, and who do so vocally, I think the more quickly we will ultimately get there. But Jack, this is fundamentally about not transforming into something we're not, but returning to who we deeply are, which is beings who are loving, who are kind, who are compassionate, and who deeply want to help lift each other up and be a part of something bigger.
Thank you, Vivek. I'm heartened. I'm touched and inspired, and basically, this is really good medicine. So may we all take
Oh,
it. May we all take the medicine and do something beautiful with it. Thank you for all the service and all the care behind it. And yeah, you've got a few more things to accomplish, and then you can check them off. But no, really, really grateful that you kind of have carried this because you really carried something for all of us, and it's a pleasure. So,
Oh, thank you, Jack. That means so much to me. And to
yeah.
do this together means a lot. And this is the work that I want to dedicate the rest of my life to. So I'm just grateful to be, again, in friendship and partnership with you and so many others out there who are listening today who I know care about this deeply, who want to help lift up humanity. And this is the work we now have to do together.
Okay, everyone, enjoy the conference.
Okay, take care, everyone.